My mother-in-law's voice dripped with venom as she accelerated away, leaving us stranded on the mountain road.
You two are nothing but a nuisance, especially that creepy child. Just looking at your face gives me the chills. Have fun living in the mountains. Goodbye.
We were supposed to be heading to a spa resort together, my mother-in-law, my daughter, and me. Instead, she had forced us out of the car and driven away, abandoning us in a remote mountain area with no idea where we were. There wasn't even any cell service. The sun was already dipping behind the mountains, painting the sky in ominous shades of orange and purple. A wolf's howl echoed in the distance, sending chills down my spine. Just as I grabbed Emily's hand to start making our way down the mountain, she gave me an unsettling smile.
I wonder if Grandma will enjoy her spa bath,
she said, her voice unnaturally calm. At that moment, I had no idea what terrible fate awaited my mother-in-law. My name is Sarah Evans, and this is my story. After graduating college, I joined a trading company and lived an ordinary life as an office worker until I met my husband through a mutual friend. Thomas was different from anyone I'd ever met, kind, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in who I was as a person. We had a normal courtship that naturally led to marriage, full of sweet moments and shared dreams of our future together. My father-in-law was a CEO of a major corporation, and Thomas was working his way up in the company under the guise of leadership training. This meant he often came home late, but I understood. The weight of his father's legacy rested heavily on his shoulders. Several years into our marriage, we struggled to conceive. Each passing month brought new disappointment, and with it, my mother-in-law's increasingly pointed comments.
When I was your age,
she would say during our forced Sunday dinners, pushing food around her plate,
I was already expecting Thomas. The Evans family has always been blessed with children early in marriage.
Her words would hang in the air like poison. My kind father-in-law acted as a buffer, often steering the conversation away from such topics, and Thomas always defended me.
Mother,
he would say firmly, these things take time. Sarah and I are happy, and that's what matters. Still wanting a child, I underwent fertility treatments. The schedule was brutal, working while going to medical appointments, trying to maintain a smile even as the hormones wreaked havoc on my body. Each injection was a reminder of what I couldn't achieve naturally, and each failed attempt felt like a personal failure. Thomas supported me through it all, accompanying me to appointments whenever his work schedule allowed. But I could see the toll it was taking on him too, the worry lines around his eyes growing deeper, the way his smile would falter when another test came back negative. One evening, as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset, he hesitantly brought it up.
Sarah,
he said, taking my hand in his,
the most important thing is for us to live peacefully and contentedly together. I want to spend my life with you, just the two of us.
His words made me realize for the first time how much we were both suffering. The constant pressure, the endless appointments, the emotional roller coaster. It was consuming our lives. That night, crying in each other's arms, we decided to stop the fertility treatments. And then, like a miracle straight out of a fairy tale, I got pregnant. We had just accepted the idea of living happily as a couple without children, so the positive pregnancy test felt surreal. Thomas and I held each other, crying tears of joy in our small bathroom. The little plastic stick that had brought us so much disappointment month after month now showed two clear lines, a promise of the future we'd almost given up on. When we learned it was a girl, we named her Emily. I spent hours decorating the nursery, painting clouds on the ceiling while Thomas assembled the furniture. Every kick, every ultrasound picture, every moment was precious. However, the delivery was difficult. What should have been a routine procedure turned into an emergency situation. I remember the panic in the delivery room, the urgent voices of doctors, and Thomas's hand gripping mine so tight it almost hurt. I had to stay in the hospital longer than most mothers, my body struggling to recover from the trauma. Still, as I held Emily for the first time, I made a silent vow. This child, who had chosen to come to us against all odds, would be the happiest person in the world. Emily grew up without any major illnesses, and Thomas and I savored our happiness. She was a bright, curious child with Thomas's gentle nature and, as everyone said, my stubborn determination. Everything seemed perfect, except for one concerning thing. It happened when Emily was 4 years old, while we were walking home from preschool. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, creating a tunnel of pink petals over the sidewalk. Emily had been skipping ahead, singing the song she'd learned that day, when she suddenly stopped and tugged at my sleeve.
Mommy?
She said, her voice unusually serious. What's wrong, sweetheart?
I don't want to walk this way today.
Huh? Why not? We need to take this road to get home. I tried to reason with her, but she planted her feet firmly on the ground, refusing to move. My head was full of question marks. Emily had never been prone to tantrums, but this felt different. Was this another phase of childhood defiance? Should I be firm or understanding? That's when it happened. The screech of tires filled the air, followed by the sickening sound of metal crushing against concrete. A car had plowed into the sidewalk just a few meters ahead of us, exactly where we would have been if Emily hadn't stopped. No way, I whispered, my knees shaking uncontrollably. If we had kept walking without listening to Emily, we would have been caught in the accident. I turned to look at my daughter. She was watching the panicking crowd without showing any particular emotion, her small face eerily calm. Did you know this was going to happen? I asked, my voice trembling. Emily nodded, her pigtails bouncing slightly.
You see, I don't know why, but I could see the car hitting that spot.
She explained what she had seen in her childish way, as if discussing what she'd had for lunch. Then, just as casually, she added,
Oh, and Daddy's going to slip in a puddle on his way home from work.
What? I was half skeptical of Emily's sudden statement as we made our way home, taking a different route than usual. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine activities, feeding her dinner, giving her a bath, and finally getting her to sleep.
I'm home,
Thomas called out later that evening, his voice echoing throughout our apartment. Welcome back. My voice trailed off as I took in his appearance. Wait, what happened to you? Thomas stood in our entryway, his usually impeccable suit completely covered in mud. Despite the state of his clothes, he was laughing, a sheepish grin on his face.
Well, you wouldn't believe it. Who would have thought?
He gestured at himself helplessly. I shouldn't have laughed, but with mud all over his face, he looked like he had suddenly grown a patchy brown beard.
Can't believe I slipped like that. Must be getting old.
He chuckled, loosening his muddy tie. According to him, he had been so excited about closing a deal that he jumped for joy, but lost his balance and landed in a huge puddle left from yesterday's heavy rain. While he hadn't been seriously injured, thanks to the soft ground, his pride had taken quite a hit. Then, I suddenly remembered what Emily had said earlier that day. The prediction about her father's fall. It had come true, just as she said it would. No way. The words escaped my lips in a whisper.
What's wrong?
My freshly showered husband asked, noticing my pale face. I told him about what had happened during the day, both the near miss with the car and Emily's prediction about his fall. As I spoke, I watched the color drain from his face, his expression growing more serious with each word.
So you're saying Emily predicted that I would fall?
He asked, his voice tight with concern. I think so. Is this kind of thing even possible? I trembled as I recalled the horrific accident we had avoided, wondering what it all meant for our daughter. Thomas held his head in his hands, and we sat in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The tick of the kitchen clock seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. Finally, my husband spoke, his voice steady despite the uncertainty in his eyes.
She has a special gift.
What do you think we should do?
All we can do is accept her exactly as she is.
Thomas had returned to his usual, gentle, composed self. He reached across the table and took my hand in his.
Emily must have some greater purpose. I don't really understand all this spiritual stuff, but maybe this power is meant to help her find her happiness.
Happiness, huh? The word hung in the air between us. Until then, I had been filled with guilt about not being able to give Emily a normal life, but my husband's words helped me feel a little better. His acceptance, his unwavering support of our daughter, reminded me why I had fallen in love with him in the first place. While we accepted Emily's mysterious power, we knew society isn't always kind to those who are different from what's considered normal. To protect Emily, we decided to keep this secret and take it to our graves. And so, Emily continued to grow, occasionally displaying her mysterious power, but otherwise developing just like any other child, until she reached elementary school. Her first day of school was a milestone filled with mixed emotions: pride at seeing her in her new uniform, anxiety about how she would cope with her gift in a classroom full of children. Around that time, my father-in-law passed away suddenly from a heart attack. The loss hit our family hard, especially Thomas, who had to step up as CEO while grieving for his father. He became even busier than before, often coming home well past midnight, the weight of his new responsibilities evident in the shadows under his eyes. He was away from home more than ever, and that's when my mother-in-law's interference became unbearable. She would appear at our door unannounced, wearing her designer clothes like armor, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently against our doorframe.
Sarah, look at how you're dressed,
she would say, her nose wrinkling in disgust.
Do you have any idea what it means to be the wife of a CEO?
Mother Evans, please ring the doorbell before entering, I would plead, though I knew it was futile. She would wave her hand dismissively, her gold bracelets jingling.
Oh, do you have a problem with that? This house might as well be mine. As a member of the Evans family, I have every right to enter.
She would barge in with such nonsense logic and criticize everything from the furniture to the decor. Nothing was safe from her scrutiny. My clothes, my personal belongings, even the way I arranged the flowers in the entryway. I could handle her criticizing just me. After years of her subtle jabs and outright insults, I had developed a thick skin. But I couldn't stand her saying things about Emily, who was her own granddaughter.
If only there was a boy too.
She would sigh dramatically, looking at Emily as if she were a defective product.
One girl isn't enough.
She would bring this up at every opportunity, her words sharp as knives. What's worse, she would say it right in front of Emily, forcing me to intervene. Mother Evans, please don't say such things in front of Emily, I would say, trying to keep my voice level while my blood boiled. But my mother-in-law wouldn't listen. Instead, she would pile on even more hurtful comments, each one designed to cut deeper than the last.
That's why I told you not to stop the fertility treatments,
she would say, examining her perfect manicure.
You might have had a boy. The Evans family needs a son, not a daughter.
Every time she said things like this, I would remember those painful days of fertility treatments, the endless doctor's appointments, the hormone injections, the hope that would build and crash month after month. My heart and mind would grow cold, remembering the physical and emotional toll those treatments had taken. While Emily might not have fully understood what was being said, she could sense that she wasn't well liked. Children are perceptive that way, picking up on the undercurrents of adult relationships even before they can name what they're feeling. When Emily was born, while my husband, father-in-law, and my parents visited every day, my mother-in-law never once came to see us in the hospital. According to my father-in-law, she was busy, but it was clear that she hadn't been happy about me giving birth to a girl. The memory of those lonely hospital days still made my heart ache. I wanted to talk to Thomas about his mother many times, but with his late nights due to his new role as CEO, I never found the right moment. Our conversations had become brief exchanges about schedules and Emily's school activities, both of us too exhausted for deeper discussions. My parents lived a plane ride away and were in a retirement community, so I couldn't possibly burden them with this. They had their own challenges to deal with, and I didn't want them worrying about me. At that point, my mother-in-law only invaded during weekday evenings, and on weekends when Thomas was home, she would put on a good face. I somewhat complacently thought it was manageable, that I could endure it for the sake of family harmony. But if I had talked to Thomas then, what happened next might have been avoided. One weekend, my mother-in-law barged in as usual, her designer handbag swinging from her arm like a weapon. She spent the first hour criticizing everything in the house, from the placement of the throw pillows to the brand of coffee in our kitchen.
Really, Sarah?
She said, running a finger along our bookshelf and examining it for dust.
How do you expect Thomas to concentrate on his work when he comes home to such mediocrity?
Then she launched into a lengthy monologue about her latest designer purchases, describing in excruciating detail how she had to special order her new handbag from Paris because the local boutique didn't have the exact shade of cream she wanted. While I was exhausted and cleaning up the kitchen, trying to tune out her endless complaints, Emily suddenly spoke up from where she had been quietly coloring at the dining table.
Grandma, are you going to enter the tall building later?
Her voice was innocent, but there was something in her tone that made me pause. My mother-in-law looked at Emily like she was something dirty, her perfectly lined lips curling into a sneer. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees.
What is this child talking about?
She demanded, her voice trembling slightly despite her attempt to sound dismissive. I'm sorry, Mother Evans. I intervened quickly. Emily, you shouldn't say things like that. Emily's lower lip began to quiver and her eyes filled with tears. The sight of my daughter's distress made my heart ache, but before I could comfort her, my mother-in-law backed away from Emily as if she were contagious.
There's something wrong with this child,
she spat, clutching her precious designer bag to her chest like a shield. Her face had gone pale beneath her expensive makeup.
I'm leaving, she announced, her voice shrill. This is too creepy.
She practically ran out of our house, her high heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floors. The moment the front door slammed shut, Emily ran to me and wrapped her arms around my waist, sobbing into my apron.
I'm sorry, Mommy,
she whispered. Emily, sweetheart. I turned around to face her and guided her to sit on the couch. Its soft beige fabric still bearing the impression where her grandmother had been sitting moments before. Emily kept her head down, her small shoulders shaking with each sob. Can you tell me something? I asked gently, brushing her tears away with my thumb. Did you see what Grandma was planning to do? Emily looked up at me, her eyes red and wet with tears. She nodded slowly, hiccuping slightly as she tried to calm herself.
You see,
she began, her voice barely above a whisper.
She's going into a tall building. She'll get in an elevator and press the button for floor 20.
Emily's small fingers twisted in her lap as she continued.
Then she'll get off and walk straight ahead to a brown door and go inside. Grandma looked really happy. I've never seen her look like that before.
I listened carefully as Emily struggled to explain what she had seen through her tears, my mind racing. That building was probably the high-rise where Thomas's company was located. But why would my mother-in-law be going there? According to Thomas, before marriage, his mother had worked at one of his father's company's business partners, and she had quit after marriage to become a housewife and had no connection to the company since then. Even after Thomas became CEO, she had shown no interest in the business beyond criticizing how much time it took him away from his family obligations. As I sat there comforting Emily, my mind wandered back to conversations I'd overheard, small details that hadn't seemed significant at the time. My mother-in-law's increasingly expensive purchases, despite no obvious source of income. The way she sometimes answered phone calls in whispers, stepping outside our house to continue her conversations. The recent decline in company sales that Thomas had mentioned. Small pieces of a puzzle were starting to come together, but I couldn't quite see the full picture yet. Around this time, Thomas had to leave for an extended business trip. He broke the news to us over dinner one evening, his face drawn with concern as he explained the situation.
The company's sales have been declining over the past few months,
he said, pushing his barely touched food around his plate.
We need to figure out what's going on. I'm planning to visit all our branch offices nationwide, inspect operations, let people get to know their new CEO.
I watched as he tried to explain it to Emily in terms she could understand, promising to bring her back presents from each city he visited. But I could see the worry lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for his water glass. That night, after Emily was asleep, we sat on our bedroom balcony, looking out at the city lights.
I'm sorry to leave you alone with Mother, he said softly. I know she can be difficult.
I wanted to tell him everything, about his mother's escalating behavior, about Emily's vision, about my growing suspicions. But seeing how heavily the weight of the company already rested on his shoulders, I couldn't bring myself to add to his burdens. We'll be fine, I assured him, forcing a smile. Just focus on what you need to do. With just Emily and me at home, my mother-in-law became even more emboldened. Her visits increased from occasional interruptions to near daily invasions. The sound of her key in our front door lock began to fill me with dread. I had work during weekdays, and Emily went to after-school care, but my mother-in-law would show up uninvited even during dinner time. She seemed to take particular pleasure in disrupting our peaceful evening routine. One evening, as Emily and I were sitting down to eat, she burst in waving one of my bras that she'd pulled from the drying rack on our balcony.
Oh, Sarah,
she said with mock concern, dangling the garment like it was something shameful.
So these are the kind of undergarments you wear while married to my son?
My face burned with embarrassment as she continued her tirade, seeming not to care, or perhaps delighting in the fact that Emily was watching wide-eyed from the dinner table. Another time, she approached Emily with a pair of scissors, a gleam in her eyes that made my maternal instincts scream in alarm.
Her hair is getting quite long,
she said, the scissors snipping in the air.
Should I cut it for her?
The way she wielded those scissors, combined with the almost maniac look in her eyes, sent chills down my spine. I immediately stepped between them, my heart pounding. That won't be necessary, Mother Evans. We already have an appointment at the salon next week. Between work exhaustion and my mother-in-law's increasingly erratic behavior, I was at my wit's end. The only respite came in the form of brief phone calls with Thomas, though I still couldn't bring myself to tell him how bad things had gotten.
How are my girls?
He would ask, his voice tired but warm. We're managing, I would reply, watching Emily push food around her plate, her usual appetite diminished by the constant tension in our home. Today was no different. My mother-in-law barged in as soon as she arrived, the sharp clip of her heels against our hardwood floors announcing her presence like a warning bell. Recently, Emily would immediately hide in her room when her grandmother came over, probably still afraid of getting scolded again for seeing the future. But today, my mother-in-law headed straight for Emily's room, her voice dripping with false sweetness.
Hey, Emily dear, let's play together today. And come out,
she called, the saccharine tone of her voice so unlike her usual sharp manner that it made my skin crawl. Emily remained silent, but I could imagine her shrieking back against her bedroom wall, clutching her favorite stuffed animal, a worn patchwork dog she named Spots.
Hey, Grandma's trying to be nice and play with you.
The sweetness in my mother-in-law's voice cracked, revealing the anger beneath. She stormed into the room before I could stop her. Emily's scream pierced the air, sending me running to her room. When I burst through the doorway, I found my mother-in-law trying to forcefully take away Spots, while Emily held on with all her might.
Stop it!
Emily cried, tears streaming down her face.
Please, stop!
Having such a creepy stuffed animal is an embarrassment to the Evans family.
My mother-in-law snarled, yanking at the toy.
No proper young lady would carry around such a ratty thing.
She was being completely unreasonable. Spots had been a gift from Thomas on Emily's first day of school, a guardian to watch over her when we couldn't be there. The toy might have been a bit worn, but it was treasured, carrying the weight of Emily's hopes and fears, her laughter and tears. Mother Evans, please stop! I got between them and held Emily protectively, feeling her small body trembling against mine. My mother-in-law's face contorted with rage.
You marrying Thomas was the mistake to begin with,
she spat.
And then you had this weird child. I told him to divorce you, multiple times.
She turned her sharp gaze on us and continued with her tirade, her words becoming more venomous with each breath.
A CEO's wife should support her CEO husband. I put aside my own needs to support my husband, but you won't even quit your job. Such a stubborn woman. You're dragging the Evans name through the mud.
She kept repeating things she'd said before, each accusation like a poisoned dart, and we endured this hellish time in silence. Emily's fingers dug into my arms as she clung to me, and I could feel her hot tears soaking through my blouse. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, my mother-in-law finally stormed out, slamming the front door so hard that the family photos on our walls rattled in their frames. Emily, I'm so sorry, I whispered, stroking her hair. You must hate it when Grandma comes over. Emily remained silent, her small fingers still clutching Spots protectively. The stuffed dog's button eyes seemed to look at me accusingly, as if asking why I hadn't protected them better. Mommy is so happy that I married Daddy and that you were born, I continued, trying to keep my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. You're the best thing that ever happened to us. Emily said nothing, but hesitantly put her arms around my back, her embrace saying what her words couldn't. We sat there together on her pastel pink carpet, surrounded by the cheerful decorations that suddenly seemed to mock our distress. The butterfly mobile Thomas had hung when we first decorated her room, the family photos on her desk, the colorful alphabet chart that now had tear stains on it. I deeply regretted not talking to Thomas about this. Emily was being hurt by something that had nothing to do with her, adult problems that no child should have to bear. I vowed never to let her experience this kind of pain again. But just as I was about to suggest we make her favorite chocolate chip pancakes for dinner, comfort food for a difficult day, Emily made another strange comment about my mother-in-law.
Grandma's carrying a big bag again,
she said quietly, her voice muffled against my shoulder. What? My heart skipped a beat at her casual words. The same kind of casual tone she'd used before the car accident, before Thomas's fall. I pulled back slightly to look at her face. Emily, what do you mean? She wouldn't meet my eyes, instead focusing on straightening Spot's crooked bow tie.
The bag is heavy, she added. She has to use both hands to carry it.
A chill ran down my spine despite the warm spring evening. Was my mother-in-law planning something? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to form a clearer picture, and I didn't like what I was seeing. The next day I took action. While my company and Thomas's company weren't in the same industry, we shared some business connections. Over the years, I'd built up a network of professional contacts. people who owe me favors or who might be willing to share information for the right incentive. Using these networks and connections, I quietly investigated my mother-in-law without her knowledge. It wasn't easy. I had to be extremely careful not to raise suspicions, making my inquiry seem casual and unrelated. For several months, I gathered information piece by piece, like assembling a jigsaw puzzle in the dark. What I discovered was shocking enough to keep me awake at night, staring at the ceiling while my mind raced with implications and possibilities. Around this time, Thomas called with what should have been welcome news. His voice was lighter than it had been in months, as he told me he might be able to take an extended vacation.
Things are getting more manageable here, he said. I was thinking we could go on a spa resort trip. You know, that nice one up in the mountains, as a way to thank you and Emily for taking care of things while I was away.
I had assumed it would be just the three of us, a chance to reconnect as a family, but somehow my mother-in-law caught wind of the plans. Looking back, I should have been suspicious of how quickly she found out, but at the time I was too exhausted to question it.
A spa trip? How wonderful,
she'd exclaim when she happened to drop by that evening.
You know, I've been wanting to spend more quality time with my granddaughter. I simply must join you.
We would meet Thomas at the resort, as he was coming directly from his business trip. My stomach churned at the thought of being trapped in a car with my mother-in-law for hours, but I tried to stay positive. Maybe this could be a turning point, a chance for her to finally bond with Emily.
Sarah, I'll drive,
she announced on the morning of our trip, jingling her car keys.
You can relax in the car with Emily, since you'll need to look after her.
Her smile was wide but didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, thank you, I replied hesitantly. But won't it be tiring to drive the whole way yourself? I drive for work, so I could...
Thank you for your concern,
she cut me off, that artificial smile still plastered on her face.
But it'll be fine. I love driving, and isn't it nice that I'm trying to help?
Then she turned to Emily, who was clutching her backpack to her chest like a shield, and gave her an unnervingly sweet smile.
Emily, are you excited to see Daddy?
Emily nodded, her eyes darting between her grandmother and me. Despite my mother-in-law's sudden kindness, Emily still seemed wary, like a small animal sensing a predator nearby. My mother-in-law appeared genuinely pleased by Emily's response, becoming almost giddy as she pored over the resort guidebook.
Oh, the spa facilities look divine, she cooed,
flipping through the glossy pages.
And look at this beautiful indoor onsen. We simply must try it.
She seemed particularly excited about reuniting with her son.
Thomas has been working so hard,
she sighed, touching a manicured hand to her chest.
He needs his mother's support now more than ever.
I wanted to believe this was a turning point, that my mother-in-law had finally decided to let go of her bitterness and become the loving grandmother Emily deserved. Nothing would make me happier than for us to become a real family, united in our love for Emily and Thomas. Back in our bedroom, I was helping Emily pack, trying to keep my own anxiety at bay. Emily, which pajamas do you want to take? Emily came skipping over, seeming to have relaxed a bit in the safety of our home.
Maybe these?
She pointed without hesitation to pajamas featuring her favorite cartoon character, a rainbow-colored unicorn with sparkly wings.
Emily's excited about the trip,
she declared with a bright smile that made my heart ache with love. What are you most excited about? I asked, expecting her to say seeing her father. We both missed him terribly during his long business trips. But Emily's answer surprised me.
Having Grandma there.
Grandma? I paused in the middle of folding a t-shirt, my hand suddenly cold.
Yeah.
You're excited about going on the trip with Grandma? I pressed, trying to keep my voice casual, even as alarm bells started ringing in my head.
Yep, because...
Emily giggled, a sound that would normally warm my heart, but now sent chills down my spine.
Because...
I forced myself to laugh along with her, but my mind was racing. The last time Emily had been this cryptically amused about something, it had involved her prediction of the car accident. What was she seeing now? What did she know that I didn't? At the time, I had no idea what my daughter was thinking. I wish I had asked more questions, pushed harder for answers. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. Finally, the day of the trip arrived. The morning was bright and clear, with just a few wispy clouds in the sky. Perfect weather for a drive through the mountains. We loaded our luggage into my mother-in-law's luxury car, the trunk barely able to close around her numerous designer suitcases. The car journey started without any delays, my mother-in-law humming along to classical music on the radio as she drove. To my surprise, she even joined in when Emily started singing popular children's songs, her normally critical voice softening as she harmonized with her granddaughter. We had a surprisingly lively time in the car, eating the snacks I'd packed and playing word games to pass the time. My mother-in-law even laughed genuinely at Emily's silly jokes, something I'd never heard her do before. But as we entered the mountains, the mood in the car began to shift. The roads became narrower, winding through dense forests that blocked out much of the sunlight. The radio signal grew increasingly staticky until my mother-in-law finally turned it off with an irritated click. Suddenly, she pulled over to the side of the road, the car's tires crunching on loose gravel. My heart started pounding, though I couldn't explain why.
What is it, Grandma?
Emily asked from the back seat, her small voice echoing in the suddenly silent car. Through the rearview mirror, I could see her hugging spots closer to her chest.
Well, I'm feeling quite thirsty,
my mother-in-law said, her ruby red lips curving into a smile that made my stomach clench. She pointed back the way we'd come, her diamond rings catching the filtered sunlight.
I spotted a vending machine earlier. Since this road is narrow, could you two go back and buy me some water? It should be about 20 meters back.
The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Sure, but... I hesitated, scanning the road behind us. The mountain path was empty, bordered by dense forest on one side and a steep drop on the other. I don't remember seeing any vending machine.
Oh, I have excellent eyesight, so I noticed it.
She replied smoothly. Too smoothly.
Please, it's just a short walk back. The exercise will be good for Emily.
I looked at Emily, who was watching her grandmother with an unreadable expression. The temperature in the car seemed to drop several degrees despite the warm spring day. Against my better judgment, Emily and I reluctantly got out of the car. The moment our feet touched the gravel, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of the car engines revving. My heart stopped. The car suddenly lurched forward, tires spraying gravel. I ran after it, my legs pumping desperately as I banged on the passenger window with my fist. Stop! Stop the car! To my surprise, the car did stop. The passenger window rolled down with an electric whir, revealing my mother-in-law's face. But gone was the sweet smile she'd worn all morning. In its place was an expression of pure malice, her carefully applied makeup making her look like a kabuki mask of cruelty. Mother Evans, what are you doing? I demanded, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Emily stood behind me, clutching the back of my shirt. Then she showed her true colors, her face contorting with years of pent-up hatred.
You two are nothing but a nuisance,
she spat, flecks of spittle hitting the window.
Especially that creepy child. Just looking at your faces gives me the chills. Have fun living in the mountains. Goodbye.
And with that, she slammed her foot on the accelerator. The car peeled away, leaving us in a cloud of dust and exhaust fumes. We were in the middle of nowhere, not another soul in sight. The forest pressed in around us, dark and forbidden, while birds ominously in the distance. I fumbled for my phone with trembling hands, but the screen confirmed my worst fears. No signal. Just no service mocking me in the corner of the screen. Emily tugged at my sleeve.
Mommy, I'm thirsty,
she said quietly. We had left our water bottles in the car along with our bags, money, and everything else. It's okay, sweetheart, I assured her, though my own throat was dry with fear. We'll find help. We just need to walk down the mountain. There has to be a town or at least a house somewhere. With no other choice, I held Emily's hand and we started walking down the mountain path. Each step crunched loudly in the gravel, the sound seeming to announce our presence to whatever might be lurking in the shadows of the trees. As we walked, my mind raced, piecing everything together. How my mother-in-law had suddenly become kind. How she had insisted on driving. How she had packed so many suitcases, as if she never intended to share the car with us on the return journey. This had been her plan all along. The spa trip, the false kindness, the sudden interest in Emily. It had all been a carefully orchestrated plot to get rid of us. She had never intended to change. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down mercilessly on our uncovered heads. Emily kept telling me she was thirsty, her steps becoming slower and more unsteady. I was feeling dizzy myself, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision. Emily, just a little further, okay? I called over my shoulder, trying to keep my voice steady despite my parched throat. Emily nodded but continued walking in silence, her small hand hot and sweaty in mine. Her normally bouncy pigtails were drooping with sweat, and her favorite unicorn t-shirt was covered in dust from the road. I couldn't believe my mother-in-law would do this, not just to me, but to Emily too, her own granddaughter, a child. What kind of person would leave a 7-year-old girl to die in the mountains? With each step, my anger grew, burning hotter than the summer sun overhead. I vowed never to forgive her. The path seemed endless, winding down the mountainside like a dusty snake. Every bend looked the same. More trees, more rocks, more emptiness. The only sounds were our labored breathing and the crunch of gravel under our feet. By nightfall, we finally reached the base of the mountain. The sight of streetlights in the distance nearly made me weep with relief. My phone started getting service, lighting up with a cascade of notifications. I had countless missed calls, all from Thomas. My hand shaking, I pressed the call button. Hello? My voice was rough from the thirst and exhaustion.
Sarah?
Thomas's voice cracked with relief.
Thank God you answered. Where are you?
We're at the base of Mount Pleasant, I managed to say. Emily's with me. The words felt inadequate to describe what we've been through. Thomas took a sharp breath and was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled.
Mom told me you suddenly remembered something and got out of the car. What really happened?
Of course my mother-in-law had fed him lies. She'd probably spent the whole drive crafting her story, rehearsing her innocent expression in the rearview mirror. So she didn't tell you anything? I began, but before I could continue, Emily suddenly shouted,
Don't come, Daddy! Stay there and enjoy the spa with Grandma!
What? I stared at Emily in shock. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes were bright with an intensity I'd seen before. The same look she'd had when she predicted the car accident.
I'm not tired at all,
she continued, her voice taking on that eerily calm tone that always preceded her predictions.
I'm not scared either. I'm fine because I'm with Mommy. Right, Mommy?
A chill ran down my spine despite the warm evening air. Sorry, I'll call you back, I told Thomas quickly and hung up. Emily? I crouched down to her level, my knees protesting after the long descent. Why did you say that to Daddy? Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. She stared at her dusty shoes instead, scuffing one toe against the pavement. The streetlight above us cast strange shadows across her face, making her look older somehow, more knowing. Her behavior filled me with an overwhelming sense of dread, and I desperately tried to convince her to tell me what she knew. Emily, please tell me what you're thinking, I pleaded. I promise I won't be angry. No matter what it is, you can tell me. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper.
After this, Grandma's going to slip in the spa and hit her head.
She hugged herself tightly as if trying to hold in the terrible knowledge.
It's a big injury, and she won't be able to walk anymore.
Hearing this, I felt the color drain from my face. The pieces clicked into place. Emily's strange excitement about having her grandmother on the trip, her insistence that Thomas stay at the spa. Half trembling, but trying to keep my voice steady, I said, I understand. Thank you for telling me. But Emily, I paused, searching for the right words. Despite remembering all the cruel things my mother-in-law had done, the years of verbal abuse, the attempts to drive us apart, and now this potentially deadly abandonment, I had to ask, are you happy about Grandma getting hurt and not being able to walk? My question seemed to pierce through whatever defensive wall Emily had built around herself. Her lower lip trembled, and suddenly she burst into tears, the sobs racking her small body.
You know,
she hiccuped between sobs,
Emily hated seeing Mommy always getting hurt by the mean things Grandma said and did.
Her words tumbled out faster now, like a dam breaking.
So Emily wanted to be mean to Grandma too.
The raw pain in her voice broke my heart. She threw herself into my arms, crying harder than I'd ever seen her cry before, her tears soaking through my already sweat-dampened blouse. All I could do was hold her tightly, my own tears falling into her dust-streaked hair. After a few minutes, when Emily's sobs had quieted to occasional hiccups, I gently pulled back to look at her face. Her eyes were red and puffy, her cheeks streaked with tears and dirt. Emily, I'm sorry, I said, wiping her tears with my thumbs. You didn't like seeing Grandma being mean to Mommy, did you? That was Mommy's fault. I should have protected you better. That's why I need you to listen to me now, okay? Emily looked straight into my eyes, her gaze impossibly old for a 7-year-old. The streetlight above us flickered, casting moving shadows across her face. Mommy would be very sad if Grandma got hurt, I explained carefully, my own voice thick with emotion. Even if it happened because of something terrible she did to us, Mommy wouldn't feel happy about it. It wouldn't make the pain go away. It would only add more pain to the world. Emily listened silently, her small fingers twisting the hem of her dusty shirt. A moth fluttered around the streetlight above us, its wings casting dancing shadows on the pavement. So let's have Daddy pick us up, I continued softly, and we'll ask Grandma not to go in the spot and wait instead. We can stop this bad thing from happening, just like you stopped the car accident from hurting us. Can we do that? Emily was quiet for a long moment, considering my words. A warm evening breeze ruffled her messy pigtails, carrying the scent of summer flowers in someone's nearby garden. a jarringly pleasant smell given our situation. Finally, she nodded.
Okay,
She said quietly.
let's have Daddy come get us.
Then she plopped down on a nearby rock, suddenly looking every bit the exhausted 7-year-old she was. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and contacted Thomas, asking him to pick us up. I also made him promise to tell my mother-in-law to wait without going into the spa. He seemed confused by the request but agreed, probably hearing the urgency in my voice. The wait for Thomas felt endless. Emily and I sat side by side on the rock, watching cars occasionally pass on the distant highway, their headlights cutting through the growing darkness like searching eyes. Neither of us spoke much. We were too exhausted, too overwhelmed by the day's events. When Thomas's car finally pulled up, the familiar purr of its engine was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. He jumped out before the car had fully stopped, his face tight with worry.